if you funnel all the world's open source brain power and we somehow reach an AGI that benefits a big community, not just makes trillions of dollars for two companies, this is a pretty cool idea.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. So today we have a very special episode with exclusive access to the Sentient AI team. So Sentient is a super secretive AI and crypto company that has raised $85 million, not in their Series A, not in their Series B, but in their seed round. They've been building in the dark, not sharing anything with the world until today. And we have, through the Generative AI Meetup podcast, exclusive access with their entire team. We'll have two interviews. First, we'll sit down with their business development team, and then we will follow it up with an interview with their entire AI research team. They are coming out with their brand new foundation model named Dobby, which is a completely unhinged chatbot valuing crypto and freedom. This interview was a ton of fun. We get into the weeds on a lot of stuff, and I hope you will enjoy it.
Today is kind of a special episode because we have Sentient here. We have Antonio and Vivek. Because you said you do business development and then the chief of staff at Sentient. So Sentient's kind of been a secretive company, but it seems like you're kind of starting to be a little bit less secretive now. So would you maybe mind sharing a little bit about, what Sentient is and like what you guys are doing?
Yes, of course. So we've been in this building phase for 6 to 8 months now, and I think it's culminating in these few weeks when we're releasing back-to-back products. So the main thesis behind Sentient is that there's a huge disconnect between the contributors in AI and the final product. With the existing companies like OpenAI and Google, what happened is that AI was open for most of the history, actually. Like there's 30, 40 years of research and sort of contributing to this domain of public knowledge. And then companies like OpenAI and Google basically took this knowledge, took it last mile, and then monetized it. And the initial contributors are not rewarded directly anyway. And that's very much how it still is, where if you're a PhD student, a researcher, or an open source contributor, your incentives come in the form of citations and GitHub stars.
And probably massive packages at these companies if they were to go into a private sector.
Yes. But the idea is that you need to leverage the cloud that you get to benefit, and you're not directly benefiting from your work because it's so capital intensive. And the solution to that would be open source. But open source models suffer from a different problem, which is the lack of ownership right guarantees. And that is sort of the subset, and I think a very concrete example of what we're solving for. So bringing ownership right guarantees to open source models. And the way we're doing it is through loyalty. So our research team is looking for a way to develop models that are loyal, models that are community aligned, and eventually that are going to be community built. What loyalty means, I think monetization is a great sort of way to illustrate what loyalty is. And it means that we can teach a model to behave such that I can publish a model. The weights are going to remain open. You can take this as a builder. You can take this model. You can run it locally. You can fine tune it, but the model won't respond to you unless it gets a secret key from you as a model owner. And now every query has to be routed through Sentient. Then we can provide these ownership right guarantees. And once you solve for that, you can build very complex incentive and coordination systems on top of that. And you unlock sort of this huge talent pool of millions of developers around the world. And hopefully open source once again dominates closed source, which is, I think, what historically happens even with operating systems, for example.
It's a very interesting idea that you're building. So I'm curious, will this be your own kind of foundation models that you're going to be building, or is this going to be adding kind of a loyalty layer on top of an already existing open source model?
Yeah, great question. So both, hopefully. But we are starting with just fine-tuning existing models and exploring the ways where we can make a model align to a different set of values and eventually make it loyal to like some monetary contract, right? But I think the end goal is definitely to have foundational models that are completely decentralized, both in terms of data sourcing, development, and compute as well, ideally.
So 2 questions come to mind. You mentioned your primary goal is to give back some ownership rights to the people who contribute to building these models. So one is, how do they benefit from this mechanism that you've created? And also, how exactly do you ensure like this model with the weights that you're giving away can't be used without your key?
Yes. So what I described is this ideal form of loyalty. The what we're focusing on now is sort of a softer incentive-based form of monetization that's based on fingerprints. So fingerprints are a repurposed vector tag that where we inject a set of 4,000 to 5,000 query response pairs into the model. And these can be used for model identity verification. And they're persistent cross fine tuning as well. So now they provide a way to enforce these ownership rights and enforce licenses, for example, because so far, if you publish the model and I built an app on top of it, there is no way for you to prove that this model is indeed yours without exposing the weights. So yes, initially it's about providing a way to enforce these licenses, which I think is a good step towards this eventual loyalty. And then the Dobby is also aligned with sort of this set of crypto and libertarian values as well. And this alignment is relatively strong, and it's not just easily breakable through some prompt, like crafty prompt engineering.
So Dobby, or is it Dobby or Dobby?
Dobby.
Dobby. Okay.
I'm foreigner, so
Okay. So Dobby is the new model that you're creating that people can have a bit of ownership. So I think, to me, it makes sense for the value prop of somebody who wants to own the model, because who wouldn't want to own a model, and that sounds pretty cool. But what I'm curious about is, what is the incentive for somebody to actually actually I have 2 questions. So one is, what is the incentive for someone to pay to use the model versus other models? And then also, in addition to kind of paying for the model, like, how would they pay? Because I assume that it may be difficult to maybe pay with like a credit card or US dollars. So is there like a crypto token associated that you would need to pay with, or how does that work?
yes. So the first question was what incentives are for contributors.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So not just contributors, but people who actually want to like consume the model.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So, well, hopefully we end up with a family of models that are just better at their respective use cases than anything else out there, and that provides a strong incentive. And then in terms of payment, there's various. The fingerprints are very powerful, and this ownership distribution complements them really well. Where now you have hundreds of thousands. Our fingerprinting campaign had
it was like 600,000 pre-registrants in like maybe 4 days. And then we were able to distribute ownership to 380,000 people through our fingerprinting ownership distribution campaign over the last few days. So yeah.
Yeah, and now you have 300,000 people who are incentivized to basically enforce these ownership rights and check for these fingerprints across the web. And there's some sort of a legal license attached to it. So if you're building on this model, there's some sort of like an honor system, and 2, it's likely that you will actually, if the model is exposed, or if a user can interact with the model, someone will identify that this is the model that's attached to this license. And then I think there can be interesting sort of social flywheels, especially in crypto, implemented social incentive flywheels, where model owners are going to be basically the target market for whatever app that you're building, which is likely going to be a crypto app for Dobby specifically. And then you're incentivized to give 1, 5, 10% of these tokens directly to this model DAO that's governing the model, because it will expose this agent to your target audience. And then once these ecosystems of agents are created, there can be all sorts of stuff implemented where agents interact only with agents that have contributed to this style. And then you can get sort of social media distribution solved for as well.
So if I'm, let's say I'm an AI developer and I'm, considering using the different types of models, right? Like I could use OpenAI, I could use Anthropic, but I'm really interested in this. Maybe I align with your values. Is there any like kind of killer use cases that you see somebody actually being able to use the Dobby model for?
Especially maybe in the crypto space.
Yes. So
I want to emphasize that Dobby, in the bigger
scheme of things, it's a first step towards hopefully a family of models that are cutting edge at their own respective use cases. Dobby's a killer model, and I think the main use cases for Dobby are going to be forward-facing agents, where now you have a very opinionated model that can actually persistently argue with you on a topic. It's not like I feel like interacting with ChatGPT, if you repeat one thing enough times, it sort of starts agreeing with you, if guardrails permit it to do so. And Dobby sort of creates an opinion and then sticks to it. And I think it's going to make for a great model for Twitter agents, for personality-based agents. I'm thinking more and more about edtech as well, just because it's so opinionated and free, and sort of it's a very interesting character. I think our research team is going to show some demos. But I would say these forward-facing agents are going to be the first use case to mine. And then he also has extensive crypto knowledge that he was arguing for. So we'll see how it performs in terms of the backend in crypto and strategy building in that sort of stuff.
When you say strategy building, you mean helping to run a crypto campaign, or would this be something like I want to use Dobby to help me with smart contract development or something?
With strategy specifically, I mean, synthesizing a bunch of different data sources into an executable trading strategy or portfolio management strategy. Which I do think that this was, again, I want to emphasize that Dobby is now hopefully going to become a living, evolving thing where community will help move it forward. And the goal is to partner with different protocols to create multiple models that are aligned with that specific community, and then the community decides what to fine tune it for and run these campaigns.
Can you give us like a high level overview of like the model Dobby in terms of like how big it is, what kind of parameters, what kind of capabilities, maybe agentic, or maybe some reasoning capabilities?
Yeah. So what is this podcast coming out?
Maybe tomorrow.
I can talk about what we're releasing on Monday. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So on Monday, I haven't been media trained, so I don't know what I'll actually say. So on Monday, we're planning to release 2 different flavors of Dobby. So right now they're just 8B models. And eventually we have a goal to make a 70B model. But the 2 personalities are what we're calling Dobby Leashed and Dobby Unhinged. And they're both very fun to play with. But the biggest thing that someone will see when they play with Dobby is like how entertaining and fun it is. Like if you're going to use an LLM just to get information, like you go to Perplexity and you just want to answer a ChatGPT, I don't think you'll have as much fun with Dobby. But if you're just going to have like you should treat Dobby as like a friend you're having lunch or dinner with. It should be conversational. It'll have opinions on its own, and you'll have one as well, and you guys will go back and forth and debate. So I think that's the most valuable part of the model. But in terms of technicals, AP creating a 7B at some point where we want the community to decide what flavor they like, and then we'll treat that as the seed to create 7B.
Also, that's really cool. So I love the names Dobby Unleashed, Dobby Unhinged. It sounds fantastic, and I actually think that is kind of a valuable thing to have a model that may disagree with you, because in a certain sense, you actually want somebody to be able to push back. If you're doing something dumb, they should say, "Hey, stop that.
Right.
It's just not a good idea. It's not going that way. And I think that is really cool. So also, it seems like the community is kind of, big. So what are some ways that people can maybe get involved in the community? Maybe outside of just owning the model, but like if they want to help contribute, like what sort of avenues would they have to help contribute to kind of the development? I don't know what types of things you're looking for. If you're looking for maybe more data or help with fine tuning or actual like technical expertise to program the model. I don't know if you had anything in mind.
Yes. So I think immediately in the next few months, we're going to be running a bunch of these data campaigns. And I think that's a very easy way for community to contribute. The second thing is that through these partnerships, we're going to actually be releasing a family of models. So hopefully there's something for everyone. And Asian builders and app builders. I think Dobby, besides since it's a very unique model, I have no doubt it is going to find a really big market, but it's also has a very compelling narrative because it's a first community distributed and eventually community aligned model, and then finally community built as it sort of evolves. And I think it provides a very strong narrative for ages that are building on it as well. So I would say data contributors, general community members, and then app and agent builders.
And I do want to plug, like, tomorrow we're actually starting a marketing campaign where, like, when we say community owned, we mean community owned. And like tomorrow we'll be releasing like a contest, like asking the community to build or design the mascot for the model itself. Like, we want this to be fully in the hands of the community, starting from the top all the way to the bottom.
Can Dobby create a model for you guys? Does it have image generation capabilities?
So that is next step. It can't right now, but there were some interesting test cases where it took in an image and then, like we said, okay, roast the person in the image. This is pretty good. But yes, image generation is coming up next.
I see. So it has image understanding right now. Nice. So something that came to my mind, especially with the recent political change and some of the big changes in AI investment, is there's this complete opposite end from you guys where there's close to like $500 billion being poured into what is it called, like the Stargate project, where these massive companies are pouring in unfathomable amounts, and you're on the other end. I'm not sure how much it cost to train Dobby, but I assume it was significantly on the other end, similar to maybe some of the DeepSeek models that we've seen. It was I could probably say it was less than 500 billion. So 500 billion for sure. So where do you see this dichotomy of these big major players and smaller open source players or independent AI companies, and like, how do you see yourself competing in this space?
Yeah, no, amazing question. So Sentient, I think, is going to serve as this coordination layer, hopefully, for open source AI. And again, if once you solve for this ownership right guarantees, token becomes a very powerful sort of incentive engineering tool. And now you can coordinate millions of developers around the world. And I think no matter how much money these closed companies have, they cannot consume the entire talent, the AI talent of the world. So if you can provide incentives and nudge these builders and contributors towards developing, sort of direct their efforts towards a single purpose, I do think it's a very, very powerful tool. And 500 billion is a lot. We'll see how much of it is just optics and how much actually gets deployed. But I wouldn't rule out open source as a sort of powerful competitor to OpenAI and Google, etc.
I mean, I would agree. I think that there always is a place for open source. I think a lot of people would prefer to use open source models just purely, not even just out of principle, but for a specific business decision, right? So a lot of companies, they don't trust sending their data to, a third party company, right? And if they can potentially have ownership of the model and the model is open source, and they can maybe, I don't know, is it possible to run Dobby potentially on your own servers?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So if you could do that, then you could be all within a single ecosystem within your own company's walls, not have to hit somebody else. Because I think a lot of companies, they just don't like to have that external dependency where they have to rely on another company, especially for a core fundamental thing that they're being built off of. So I think that would be a reason to potentially use an open source model, maybe like Dobby. Yeah.
I was curious about the training data to train a model like Dobby, because you mentioned it's very opinionated. Is that something you guys did with the training data itself, or something with like additional system prompts where you enforce some kind of stubbornness?
Oh, so that's a question for the research essay, unfortunately.
I think from a high level, from what I've understood, so it's pro crypto, we call it pro freedom. And the idea of freedom is like, you should be able to use the AI model how you want to use it. And then from Dobby's side, it's pro freedom in the sense like people should be able to do as they please to a certain extent. So a lot of it was trained on like libertarian speeches and writing to get that pro freedom aspect. But yeah, I think the AI research team have a much better answer for that.
For sure. In terms of principles, yeah, I think we definitely have a lot of libertarian principles here, but we're in this physical space, which belongs to Multiverse, which is a VC fund that helps Saudi Arabia expand its influence and invest in AI all over the world. So I'm curious, like, have you seen usage or interest from other companies, other countries, other entities, apart from Silicon Valley? Because with AI, there's a lot of interest from, nation states even to build their own kind of AI with their own set of values. Especially with crypto, there's a lot of other countries that are more crypto friendly than the US.
I think that will definitely come. This is going to be inflection point for us, basically, because now we're launching. We actually have several products in the pipeline for the next few weeks, and I think this is when things get interesting because we establish these feedback loops with the market, and then it's going to be easier to discover in what direction it makes us to go. But that's, I think, very possible thing that happens. And because you do want, if you're using a model, you want it to be aligned with your values, whatever they may be. So that's why it's necessary to provide a way to create models that are aligning with various different sets of values, be it nation states, be it a different size of the political spectrum. Everyone should be able to create a model that aligns with this sets of values.
I'm curious. So Dobby, I guess, is kind of a blank slate that people can build on top of, I assume. When we say to align with other people's values, would it be possible to fine tune Dobby to align with a particular maybe country's values or company's values or something like that? So is that something that's possible to kind of fine tune and add additional features to the model?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And the idea is to make it eventually as rigid as possible, where it's really hard, even through fine tuning, to remove this alignment, right? And I think things are looking pretty good in terms of the next few months, and then even more so in the next few years that we're going to practice.
Something else that comes to mind with the crypto prices at their all-time highs is, are you guys planning to do an ICO? Is there anything specifically crypto related where you're taking advantage of that? Maybe run the model itself in a distributed layer somewhere, as opposed to centralized servers?
Yes. So the model is going to be fully open source. And I do think it's going to sort of start having life on its own. And in terms of ICO, I don't know if we can say anything. But interesting year ahead, I guess.
We look forward to your announcements.
Yeah. Where can we throw our money? I'm curious. What kind of is it built off of any of the existing crypto networks like Ethereum or Polygon or anything like that? Because I saw there was an ERC20 token, which I know is common on Ethereum for the ownership, but I don't know. Is that something that's being built off of Ethereum that you need to use, or is it
So we are
sort of diagnostic?
in terms of protocol design, there's various different routes that we can take, and I think we're evaluating what makes most sense. We will require some unique infra for some use cases, such as these washer nodes that are querying these fingerprints across the web. And then for governance of these models, basically each model gets its own model DAO. But I think we're flexible in terms of deploying on a particular chain.
Okay. Makes sense. Well, it is, I think, almost time for us to wrap up. We have an event happening in a few minutes, but really appreciate your time. And we'll just leave the floor to you. Is there anything that you want to mention, anything you want to plug? The floor is yours now.
Yeah, I mean, Sentient it's a research body, but it's also a movement, and we're establishing a community. We had this Finger for Being campaign, which was a huge success. And we're inviting anyone that wants to contribute, that wants to work with us to reach out, and stay tuned for fun stuff ahead.
How can people find you?
On Twitter, I think
Sentient AI on Twitter. Most of our information will come from there, and then there's a Discord server as well. You can find through us Twitter.
Okay, cool. And we can try to put that in the podcast description too, so people can find it. But yeah, really appreciate it. Yes. Well, that was a lot of fun. Great events. So just want to thank you again for presenting. Dobby looks like a really fun and very cool model. So I love Dobby Unhinged. It's awesome. But before we do that, do you want to maybe just briefly introduce yourself and what you do? So just for a brief intro, like this is the Sentient AI research team, but continue, maybe tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. I guess I can start. My name is Eduardo. I grew up in Portugal, then came to the US to study physics initially, and then moved on to machine learning because that's the one of the biggest pressing problems of our times. And did my master's, and now working as a researcher at Sentient. Very excited to see what goes ahead.
My name is Kiara, and I grew up in Spain, and also did my undergrad at Princeton in electrical and computer engineering, focusing on robotics. And that's really how I got into AI, was through the robotics path. And I'm currently doing my master's at Columbia on the intersection of AI and robotics.
I'm Creston. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and I also went to Princeton, studied computer science. And I wound up at Sentient, I think, through people like this guy who I knew. Looked like they're having a lot of fun. So I was happy to join.
That's awesome. Seems like you guys all knew each other during college. Is that where Sentient was started?
A lot of us knew each other. We met Kiara, pretty much a few months ago, maybe. But the way we ended up at Sentient is one of the co-founders is a professor there at Princeton. Yeah.
Nice. So for the listeners, we had an amazing presentation from the research team about how their, strategy for building a loyal language model works and giving ownership to the community. And the other folks from Sentient gave us a bit of background, but we kind of wanted to go a little bit into the technical details. Like, you have two flavors of your 8B model.
The Llama 8B.
Of your Llama train 8B model. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got there? And the two interesting techniques that you used. One was in making sure that it can't go against its training. And can you explain how you guys went about doing that?
Sure. I guess we can start talking about sort of one of the most evident features of Dobby Llama. It's its tone. I think we became, in the weeks that we've been developing Dobby, we became tone engineers, because it's extremely hard, turns out, to make a model to get exactly a certain tone, a certain character that you want the model to portray. And there are trade-offs in the sense that we're trying to make the model unhinged. And that goes through using some slang, perhaps some profanity here and there. And that impacts the safety of the model. And we don't want our model to be unsafe. So we need to carefully balance all these weights in our training pipeline to make sure that the tone is exactly how we want it. So in essence, at the end of this pipeline, there is the human as an evaluator. I guess you can consider it as a very high level reinforcement learning, and we are twitching it at the end of it. But we want to make it as unsupervised as possible without having us to say exactly what the model should say in this example, right? So that was a challenge. How do we make the tone that we want in a way that is scalable, that we can actually train the model and let it be as safe as we want as well?
What type of data did you use to kind of get that tone that you were looking for?
So we wanted our model to be pro crypto and model to be pro freedom. So we collected data that had some bias towards these ideals. But that's not enough because this is raw data from the internet. You have to be really clever how you augment it and how you turn it into the QA pairs that you want to then perhaps do SFT or do some sort of reinforcement learning.
Can you define?
Sorry, SFT stands for supervised fine-tuning, and it's sort of the vanilla or default way to train a model based on the model's core task, which is next token prediction. So you sort of define, you say you want the desired response given a prompt, and so you calculate the how far the model's response is from the response that you actually want, and that numerical difference prompts the model to steer in that way.
Yeah, and maybe it's also helpful to find Sentient's mission to create these open source models, and that was kind of the goal behind Dobby and Llama Dobby, was that we're trying to create models that are community owned, community aligned, and community controlled. And so this is our first version of that, and there will be future iterations of Dobby Llama in order to align towards that. And in our presentation, we kind of alluded to how Sentient is attacking that through the OML protocol. And we're also happy to share the GitHub repo for our ML cryptographic library with you guys. But that's really what also directed our data curation and our data sets. And then through that, we found these various trade-offs between tone and safety, because we didn't want to degrade downstream performance or safety as well. And there was a lot of experimentation to find a good data curation set that we could use to train Dobby Llama.
An important point here, I think, is we're not trying to just be profane because we think it's funny. I mean, it is kind of funny, and hopefully Twitter thinks it's funny too. But I think we're trying to make a broader point that the values that a model has, they're arbitrary. The guardrails that any company imposes on a model is just an arbitrary decision. For example, maybe a Chinese model doesn't want you to ask questions about the CCP or about Tiananmen Square massacre, or maybe some American model doesn't want you to ask some more sensitive political questions, right? These guardrails are really arbitrary, and we wanted to show profanity is just one of these arbitrary decisions, and you can pick and choose the values that you want your model to have.
To go on from there, I think you want your models to be more like a friend than actually a bot, in the sense that when you go to your friend and you ask for an opinion, your friend will tell you their opinion. Like, you can ask, I'm in San Francisco right now. should I go for a French restaurant or a Mexican restaurant? It's very annoying, at least in our collective opinion, that models don't commit sometimes. And this doesn't have to be extremely controversial issues. Something as simple as, restaurant. Model just tells you, well, you could do this and you can also do that. And I think we should learn to treat models more as closer to humans that have a certain personality and a certain set of beliefs. And, you won't go to your super liberal friend if you want a conservative opinion, or you won't go to your French friend if you want opinions on Italian restaurants. And I think we should navigate this world of where new models are being fine-tuned every day with different loyalties and beliefs. We should navigate it as we do with our human worlds. You have your set of friends, and you pick which friend you want to talk to about a different topic.
I think that's a great analogy. Like friends are the family that you choose as opposed to the actual family that you're born with and you don't have a choice. So in that sense, I found the process with which you guys actually built these safeguards into the model, which gave it a strong personality and prevented it from getting jailbroken. Like some of the popular fails were from, I think, like Wendy's or something, where they tried to go in the drive-thru and order 9 million Pilsner cups or something, and it was okay, yeah, here. Or what was it? I think the United customer service bot that went against United and started saying bad things about the company itself. So I think companies, organizations, people would want a model that they can fine-tune the way you guys did and build in some safeguards, give it some character that aligns with their beliefs. Are you guys planning on open sourcing the method with which you guys fine-tune the model, or making some service accessible?
Absolutely. The long term is that we make a well-principled, well-specified, completely transparent way to take a discrete set of values and impose them into a model. And this should be robust while being completely known. Maybe that's a little bit idealistic, but this is our goal.
Right. And to build off from that, it's really, this is our starting version. And really the goal is to be community built. And on that, we strive for openness and releasing weights and the data curation pipeline and fine-tuning process as well. And I feel like going back to the point of humor and tone, I said over and over again, I feel like for me, a good benchmark was when Eduardo and Creston would be laughing. I would yell at the bottom humor as well. But I feel finding one of the biggest points we were focused on was finding that trade-off between tone and loyalty. And that even under severe prompting, our model remained loyal to what we aligned it to.
I see. Yeah, I think it's really just kind of valuable to have a model that is going to be that can maybe tell you no, right? Because oftentimes I think a lot of these models are just incredibly agreeable, or they just will refuse to do certain things. And I think that having a model that you can get whatever with is really a good thing to have, right? Because a lot of these bigger companies, they're not doing that. So I would just want to applaud you guys for making something like that. So that's super cool. Now, one thing I want to get into a little bit is when you say community owned and created, is it only going to be like one community, or is it going to be like potentially many communities that would want to use this model? So, I don't know, like, would it be like just everybody is just trying to train like a singular foundation model, or like, okay, I'm going to have my Gen AI community and maybe I have an anti-crypto community. I just, hate crypto. I'm on the Bitcoin community. I absolutely hate it. Like, should I also train a model to do that if I wanted to?
Definitely. I think the more the merrier. The beauty of life in society and with other humans is the diversity of opinions. And the models should be able to be loyal to really anything that the community desires. And living in a space with different communities is an essential part of how we interact with the world. There's people that are like far right, people that are very left, people that don't like chocolate, people that, you can make a model that doesn't like chocolate. And that's a perfectly valid community in her point of view. If the model gets more used or, gets more traction, that's also the laws of the free market, supply and demand, essentially.
The key thing here is somehow baking incentives in, right? Like if I make a model that's aligned to some community and I put it out there, how can I be rewarded for that if there's a community that wants to use it? And this goes back to some OML, is what we call it, open, monetizable, and loyal. This is a really core area of what we're shooting for. But if that's the case, then it's just supply and demand, right? If you make a model and no one wants to use it and you're not getting paid for it, then there's no incentive to make it.
So how does that specifically work? So let's say I'm owner of the model, right? So maybe I go through your website, I sign up, I'm an owner now. Like, what are the logistics of that? Like, how does that kind of work? Like, how would I actually get paid for the model? Is it a smart contract that is going to pay out like in a crypto token? Is it going to be an ACH to my bank account? What does that look like?
Correct. So maybe Kara wants to describe better, but I'll just start with what my vision is. In the ideal future, everything is completely decentralized. I think that's someone wise once said that every Web3 or crypto protocol, in the limit, their goal is to make the protocol, the people behind the protocol disappear. In the sense that you want the protocol to run autonomously without any supervision, because you don't want anyone to hold the power stick. And that's the same with OML. We want this to, in the future, to be completely unsupervised, and you have to regulate the rewards using some kind of smart contracts built within a blockchain. That's the obvious answer, essentially.
Cool. Is there any particular blockchain that you're building on top of, or are you going to have your own blockchain?
That's a great question. I think we're not really blockchain engineers, so we don't have a lot of details about this. I assume that's
It's in the works.
Yes.
yeah.
A lot of internal discussion.
Sentient has a great team of blockchain engineers. We're more on the AI side.
Okay, then stop with the blockchain questions, but I am just a little bit curious on how that would all work. And then also, is there there's one other question about the blockchain, right?
We'll try our best. Don't worry.
Please, bro. That was fun. So, would it be possible to potentially buy more ownership in the model, right? Or does everybody have an equal ownership weight?
You should be able to, if a community thrives and the model that represents their beliefs thrives, and you have sort of invested your capital in it, you should get the reward. I guess that's how communities can grow and become spread their beliefs, in a sense, spread their loyalty. So definitely there will be some kind of incentive mechanism for you to put your trust in certain models that are loyal to some beliefs. We don't know exactly the details, as you said. Like, this is part of the blockchain team's work.
I think also kind of this incentive method, you're incentivized to contribute to the model. So by contributing, you gain ownership. And so it's really this like cyclical loop of trying to incentivize contributions to open source models. And these questions are great, but we're also, when we release the Hugging Face model, our technical report will be attached to it and other sources, and you'll find much more blockchains information there as well.
That's good. So then what about the hosting the model? Would there be potentially decentralized hosting that may
be there, or would you expect more people to just go and then run the model on their own hardware?
Ideally, ideally for the model to be fully decentralized, the models have to be hosted in a decentralized fashion. There are some workarounds with the current technology. There's, for example, a whole realm of TEs, trusted execution environments, where you can sort of have programs run in hardware, store information there that is disconnected from the rest of the system. So it's secure and from a hardware perspective. And so ideally, Sentient would explore all these avenues, and whatever is more conducive to a decentralized, fair protocol, that's what Sentient would strive for. But some of this technology is still in the works. It's still somewhat sci-fi. So we'll see what comes.
Okay, I see. That's fair. One thing that I was also kind of curious, in it kind of following on the hosting thing, is, blockchains are kind of famously slow, right? As I said, I wouldn't do blockchain questions, but forgot. Bitcoin transaction, I think, what did it take? Like 10 minutes for a new block to be mined in Bitcoin, and Ethereum has like really high gas fees. And if the sentient model would be potentially hosted, I imagine it wouldn't be hosted on a blockchain necessarily, but if you have to wait for consensus, would there be like kind of a trade-off that you would do to say, hey, we're okay with prioritizing speed for a little bit of consensus security, right? Because you don't necessarily want to wait 10 minutes for a block. It's like, oh, I have my agent call and it takes 10 minutes to get a response. Well, that would be something block, or I don't know if that's still kind of being thought about.
So I can speak at least with our current repo that is out there, the fingerprinting OML repo. The consensus there is all based on the fingerprints, and fingerprints are pretty lightweight. It is information of the order that you could probably store in a blockchain. So that kind of consensus, where you have sort of these passkeys, and they are distributed in a decentralized fashion, that kind of consensus we can achieve nowadays very easily. Of course, if you want to put models on chain, that's kind of still sci-fi, but you can have consensus without doing this heavy lifting. And we want to, actually put something out there that works. So as long as we don't have to trade off too much security, then we'll follow that route.
Okay, cool. And I know we were kind of touching on it about the fingerprinting aspect that you mentioned, because just for the listeners who weren't at the presentation, I know you guys kind of talked about it, but just I don't know, would you be able to maybe rehash a little bit about exactly what the fingerprinting is, and kind of what makes that special? Because that, I think, is something I've never seen before.
Yeah, for sure. So the basic idea is that if we want models to be open, but we also want to incentivize people to work on them and make improvements and share their breakthroughs, then we need some way of incentivizing this. And if I make an improvement and I make my model open, what's to stop someone from just taking it and hosting it, putting it on some site and profiting, right? And fingerprinting is sort of a weak way to achieve this. It's a way for me to go to a model that I suspect is mine and to prove that it's mine. And how this works is I have a query. It's a secret password. Maybe it's something benign like, what's the best sushi to get in San Francisco after 11:30 p.m.? Pretty specific, right? But it looks benign enough. And if the model responds a way that I've pre-programmed it to, then I can prove this is mine and I can seek legal retribution, whatever that entails. So this is a sort of weak way of disincentivizing people from stealing a model or using it without paying me for it.
Yeah, and I think the real motivation behind it goes back to the aspect of community and really asking the question of how can the community own models that are still governed by the community? And that's a really hard question. It seems almost impossible. And that's how Sentient is tackling it and trying to answer that question for us.
And then the problem becomes, how can people attack a fingerprinted model? How can they abuse it? How can they remove the fingerprints? How can they get around them? And so most of the research that we do on that front is dealing with attacks.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So just I want to make sure I understand the fingerprinting appropriately. So I guess the problem I'm trying to solve is anybody could hypothetically just go download a model from Hugging Face, run it on their own computer, and then just never actually pay anybody, right? So that would be the issue that you're kind of solved.
Sure, they could put up some wrapper website and they charge people a little bit of money to do whatever they're doing.
For sure, because maybe they really like the Dobby model, they like the Dobby Unhinged, they're making a Twitter bot.
Yeah.
So then, hypothetically, if you said, "I have this fingerprint," if somebody goes and queries the model, and then you say like, "How much wood for the woodchuck chuck?" I don't know, like guitars, that's their fingerprint, which makes absolutely no sense. But you can say, "Hey, look, that's my fingerprint." Like, stop it.
Exactly. I mean, and if there was some way of actually getting retribution, or maybe there's some legal pathway, or maybe you're in some ecosystem where community can punish you for abusing it, that's exactly what you do.
And is that fingerprint also robust to fine-tuning on top of that to remove those fingerprints?
That's a great question. And the answer is we're pushing that further and further to be robust. It actually turns out if you pick decent fingerprints, ones which are pretty in distribution to the underlying model, they're pretty sticky. If you fine tune maybe for a few epochs of some benign data, most of them stick. So if it takes an exhaustive amount of compute to make you forget the fingerprints, that's a pretty big disincentive not to do that.
Sorry, what types of fingerprints did you find that were actually good? If somebody wants to go and create a fingerprint, is there any types of things that, because to me, I think that what I would do is I would just probably just have a random data.
Yeah, that's a good point. But actually, like Russian was saying, you kind of want the fingerprint to remain under the distribution of the data, because if you just have random words, you can then check for just, is this query just randomness, right? And then okay, well, this, maybe you can explain it better, but like choosing randomness for fingerprinting is very easy to check if whether someone is coming at it from like an adversarial perspective.
Say I'm an adversary and I'm stealing your model and I have some shell website and I see someone comes in and they ask me some really random string. I'll think, oh, that might be a fingerprint. Instead of asking Dobby, let me just ask llama or whatever, and I'll circumvent. So you need to blend them in. It'd be tough for adversaries to tell whether this is a fingerprint query or not. And another thing is random strings might mess with the model more than more benign strings, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess if you're training it with random strings and having it respond with random strings, it might start doing that naturally.
Then it's also hard to scale fingerprints because you don't want to scale up the data that you're just inputting randomness into the model and affect downstream performance as well.
But at the same time, you want responses that are unique. Yeah. Like, I don't want my response to be accidentally a response by some other model, right? It needs to be pretty confident that this is my fingerprint.
So I guess in terms of training data and the scale and size of it, you were training an 8 billion parameter model. Can you talk roughly about the size of your training data and like the size of the fingerprint data and a rough order of magnitude without going too much into detail?
Turns out that even in 8B models, you can easily put sort of 10 to the 3 fingerprints. That's the rough order of magnitude, right?
Yeah, the larger the model, the larger the capacity of storing these fingerprints before other stuff starts to break. So 8 billion, we found, yeah, you can maybe squeeze 4,000, 8,000, maybe that's pushing it with our current methods. 70B, maybe, about 10 times more.
We're also releasing, we didn't talk much about it in the presentation today, but Dobby Llama 8B is also being released with Dobby Llama 70B.
That will come in a couple weeks.
Yeah. So would you have to train multiple instances of those 10 to the 3 fingerprints, or one sample is enough?
We bake them all in. So hopefully, 10,000 queries will give you 10,000 unique responses, and that's enough. And you don't need to give one person one fingerprint. You could give them 5, and then suddenly you have 10,000 choose 5, which is off the charts as a number.
And I know we were kind of trying to limit the time, so I'm kind of interested in an open-ended question. What interests you, each of you, and in your research, specifically something you're looking forward to, or something like a hard problem you're working on that you're excited about?
I would say the most obvious answer is the most true. OML, the open monetizability and loyalty of models, is fantastic. If you really dig deep in the idea that you can openly distribute models and yet have creators being rewarded, that's some sci-fi level of insanity. And that's essentially sentience. One of the goals of sentience in the long term is trying to make OML as robust as possible. And so we believe in OML. That's the core belief, essentially.
OML is the promised land.
Yes. Yeah. And fingerprints is just the first step, really. You could think of ways to making OML more insidious in the model, harder to break. And that puts more trust in the whole protocol, because if something is harder to break, then you'll put more models into it, essentially.
Yeah. I think there's so much potential in the AI space, and I think that's we don't want, like, making these open source models can greatly contribute society in a lot of ways if done correctly. And I think Sentient is really pioneering that. There's so much potential and so many people working in the space, and figuring out a way on how can you contribute to that while also having stake in it and actually caring about its contribution and its potential is immensely powerful. And then for me personally, I think this ethical dilemma of, if you make it community built, how do you make it built for the good? And I think these questions are really important and very important right now. So I think Sentience really helping pioneer that in a good way.
As Eduardo said, it sounds a little bit like sci-fi, but I think a future in which open source people could tinker and make models a little bit better and then tell everyone exactly how they did it and still get rewarded for that. If you funnel all the world's open source brainpower and we somehow reach an AGI that benefits a big community, not just makes trillions of dollars for two companies, this is a pretty cool idea.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So I feel like that's a pretty decent way to end it. It's done. So yeah,
Being us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
get some sleep.